Hey, Grand Ascension, everyone. It's me, Nisi Denise. I'm back to do a part two of a video over classification, reclassification. Before I get started, though, I want to pull up a document that I had opened before, okay? And I want to take us back to this document here, okay? Let me check my sound and let me check my screen and make sure I'm good to go, that I'm coming through okay in my live. And then we're going to get started because I have a lot to cover and I just want to try to make it as concise as possible. Okay. So, one second while I check and see. Yep, I hear myself and I'm good to go. So, I am live. All right. So, first things first, I hope everybody's having an amazing day. I am taking some time off today just to recoup and just relax and do some things that I like to do, which is crochet and read before the next filing cycle. So, yeah, you guys got my undivided attention right now. I am going to read something from Mike Lane's Reclassified, and then I'm also going to read a smidge from Negroids in America. The Negroids in America, I did not make a scanned copy of it, so I do not have it on the screen to read to you. So if you just want to just look at this picture and just listen to me really quick, I'm going to try to get through this as quick as possible. The other day when I started reading, I read to you like the first couple of pages over the weekend, and I just want to read something. I just want to pick up where I left off, and I just want to reread this because this is going to hopefully make sense to some of you once you start to do either your genealogy or you start to go down the rabbit hole and you start to look at how we, as the autochthonous American Indians, aka reclassified 6 times, to what they want to call us now, African American. When you start to do your research, there is a lot of cast of characters that come out into the mix. And you have to understand that a house that is stands together cannot be divided. Okay. And stagnation does breed contempt. Stagnation does breed parasites. It really does. And the destruction started from within, right? So if you are cohesive with your family and your unit, husband and wife, whatever, unity, then no one can bring or come apart, right? No one can tear you apart. It's just when you start to have the wars within the home and arguments, that's when an invader can sneak in. And it was done by multiple people on multiple points over multiple history of events and timelines. So just listen to this real quick, all right? I hope my sound's coming in okay. It says, um, my family's silence was not a choice. It was a symptom of a much larger disease. It was the quiet, lingering echo of a national policy of enforced amnesia. This was not a private family secret kept in the back rooms of a house in Pine Bluff. It was a public crime executed on a continental scale with the full force of the United States government and its academic institutions behind it. The lie they taught me in school was not a simple mistake. It was the cornerstone of a conspiracy so vast and so successful that it has endured for centuries. They call it the Great Erasure. Okay. And that's what we're talking about today, the reclassification and the Great Eraser of the people here on this soil that have been reclassified and who are walking around with amnesia. All right. So it says, um, its purpose was as simple as it was diabolical. How can a colonizing power justify the theft of a continent and the enslavement of its people if those people are, in fact, the original inhabitants of the land? A profound and impossible contradiction arises. You cannot make treaties with one group of people you label Indians while simultaneously holding another, more ancient indigenous group in chattel slavery. The entire colonial project would collapse under the weight of its own hypocrisy. To solve the problem, a great fiction had to be invented. A lie had to be told. The true primordial people of the land had to be stripped of their identity, severed from their history, and turned into foreigners in their own home. We had to be made into Africans so that we would forget that we were the first Americans. All right? That's what I wanted to point out. Okay? I wanted to point that out. Now, it says, This was not a private family secret kept in the back room of a house in Pine Bluff. This is the author talking about his family, right? He says it was a public crime executed on a continental scale with the full force of the United States government and its academic institutions behind it. We know that after the fall of Tartary and the reconstruction of the U.S. in 1924 is when the educational system was set up. All right. So let me go through this now. I know you guys can still see my screen. And we're going to go through the first misclassification, the Spanish mislabeling, and the birth of the racial categories, okay? Because it's very important for you guys to understand what has transpired, okay? And I'm just saying this, so let's get into it. So you can see my screen here. Again, shout out, this is Mike Lane's information. You guys can go over on Native Ancestry, NativeBlackAncestry.com. You can hire him to do a consultation, sit down with you and go through your genealogy and pay for your genealogy, or you can learn the tools of the trade and do the genealogy yourself, right? So let's get into this part. It says the reclassification of the indigenous peoples in the Americas did not begin with the United States. It did not begin with the British, the French, the Dawes Commission, or even with the racial logic we think of today. It began in the moment Europeans arrived, the moment their eyes landed on peoples whose existence contradicted every assumption they brought across the Atlantic. When the Spanish stepped onto the shores of the Caribbean, Florida, and southeastern coasts, their first reports read like a collision between two worlds. The chroniclers who accompanied those early expeditions struggled to reconcile what they were seeing. Indigenous nations who were dark-skinned, multilingual, agriculturally advanced, politically organized, and spiritually complex. Peoples with cities, plazas, engineered landscapes, astronomy, medicine, and maritime networks stretching across the Caribbean and into the Gulf. You got to understand, we are a civilization that built pyramids. We have over 2,000 pyramids here in the United States alone. We have more pyramids here in the Americas than in Africa. All right. All right. So I'm going to try to take it slow, you guys. Try to slow down because it's so much information and it's very powerful. But once you have the eyes to see it, you cannot unsee. All right. Now, I want to point out something. I didn't scan a copy of this book, but I'm just going to read something to you guys. I know y'all listening, whoever's on. Hey, Sean, how you doing? I think I see you popping up on my cell phone. Thank you for joining me. All right, so I want to bring out 3 points real quick. I'm going to make 3 points before we get started for the rest of this. One point is most people don't know, because they didn't teach this in school. I'm going to tell you. Most people don't know that the oldest forest on the planet is in Cairo, New York, found in an abandoned limestone quarry dating back 386 million years. All right. So when we talk about the foundation of this plane of existence and this planet, we are led to believe that overseas in the Middle East, that is where the promised land is. That is where those specific people are. That is where we're having this great war right now with Iran and the U.S. and the other country, which I won't mention on this video. We're led to believe that that is the chosen land over there. No, the ground zero is here in the Americas. All right. I'm going to point that out. One, we have the oldest forest upstate New York. All right. That's a fact. You can go look that up. It's called the Cairo Forest. It's up near New York, and it stretches from New York up to Pennsylvania and beyond. The magnificent trees developed an intricate root system that played a vital role in shaping our planet's climate. These trees absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. That's the first thing I want to tell you right there. We have the oldest forest here in the Americas. Number 2, that with our ancient ancestors, the ancient wisdom that we had previously, we also have what's called the Milpa planting system. All right. And it's also known as the Three Sisters. It's the ancient wisdom of the people here in the Americas, indigenous to this land, aka black people, aka mislabeled as Negro, African American, colored, mulatto. We used this root system to plant and produce food all around the world. All right. I'm telling you, all around the world. When you utilize this Milpa planting system, The soot from the coal is signified as Egypt's ancient name is Kemet, or black land. The soil is fertile here in the Americas, and it was known as the black land due to the fact that they found this coal deposits and residues here in the Americas. And it says coal is a fossil fuel formed from remains of dead plants that were buried in swamps and subjected to heat and pressure over millions of years. Now, Africa is not ground zero from where we come from, all right? And I'm going to tell you, the absence of coal in the African lands reveals a lack of extensive vegetation in ancient times. Similarly, modern day scientists and historians say that Sudan was once a lush rainforest, but Sudan's coal production hints at a different story altogether. The absence of coal in Sudan signifies the improbability of there ever being a forest in Sudan in ancient times. The correlation between coal and vegetation illustrates the deep interplay between our planet's geological history and ancient civilizations. Number two, I gave you three. One, the forest, oldest one on record on the planet, is up through Pennsylvania and New York. This is ground zero. America is the true old world. This is ancient Egypt, all right? Egypt was a period of time. Number two, the coal deposits here, which helped fund the wars. We produced over 75% of the coal for the whole entire planet right here in the Americas. That's a fact. You can go look that up. I can drop references and sources if I need to, all right? And then the next thing, the third thing that I want to talk about to you guys before we go on to this next page that I want to read is that you got to look at the Milpa planting system, which is like a strategic intercropping of 3 plants of maize. Let me see. I'm sharing my screen, so let me go do this. I'm gonna show you a picture real quick, so I can give an idea what kind of give you an idea what I'm talking about. So this is what it involves. It involves maize, squash, and beans when they grow, when our ancient ancestors grew. And I hate that I'm using Bing. I usually use Google. It's like this. So these plants, the way they, when we plant them, these plants together, each component serves as a specific purpose in creating a sustainable and harmonious frequency among these 3 plants. Maize provides a sturdy structure for beans to climb, while the beans fix nitrogen in the soil, benefits the growth of both maize and squash. Squash acts as the ground cover, okay, suppressing weeds and conserving moisture. All right, this is the only place the Sumerians depicted the maize, the beans, squash, which is called the 3 sister combo, on the tablets, which suggests a deep understanding of the planting system that we're talking about right here in America, you guys. All right, we fed the entire world. Okay, Africa, last point I'm gonna make, and then we're gonna get back to this other part. The last point I want to make is when you look at the vegetation in Africa, it was once a point in time where the crops that we grew fed the entire planet. And that's a fact. That is a #1 fact. And if you look at what plants are grown in Africa and what produce is there, 640 crops grown in Africa today, almost 600 of them originated here in the Americas. Okay, they basically only had about 47 crops, and then we gave them the other 600. Okay, and that's including the #1 cash crop, the cassava. All right, it comes right here in the Americas. Okay, so this is something that people really need to take a look at and understand that we actually were superior in every way, because when this plane of existence was founded, it was founded here in the Americas first, ground zero. Like I've showed you guys pictures before of the Grand Canyon on my last video. All right, I'm not getting off topic. I just want to see if I can pull this up real quick. Let me go to Google. Let me see. Nope. Let me see if I can go to Google. Hold on. Let me just see if I can do that. Are y'all still seeing my screen? Probably not. I think I did something. Hold on. Let me go back. I can't get to it. Okay, here we go. All right. This is not a good shot, but I'm just trying to show you. This was what was once left of the Grand Canyon, ancient civilization here. I'm gonna play this video real quick. Let me see if I can go to this screen without dropping something. I got a lot of tabs open. I should have put this over on my larger screen, so I apologize. 1 second. Let me make sure y'all can see me. There's a delay here. 1 second. 1 second. I'm gonna let it catch up. Yeah. All right. So let me see. I'm gonna play this video. This is Tyler Durden, and I want you just to listen to this real quick. All right.
Autoimmune epidemic in 180 seconds. Autoimmune disease is supposedly the
Nope,
body
it's not the right one.
This isn't
My bad. 1 second. 1 second. I'm trying to go to this one more.
Let's talk about who the Moors really
Okay,
are.
here we go.
Their history has been whitewashed by others and by themselves. A Moor is a very broad term. It is a group of groups. Not only were they whitewashed in the heart, they also whitewashed themselves. They were some of the first to breed with their slaves. They were the black Huguenots in France. They were obviously the Moors of Spain and Portugal, but also the Sephardim. They were the black British, who Marcus Garvey descended from, and they were the black Habsburgs of the Holy Roman Empire. It's important to remember that Rome is Edom. Japheth and Edom crossbred to make Rome. Here's the genealogy, and Edom or Esau was ruddy, just like King David. Ruddy means red-brown or copper-colored. There was never really a fall of Granada. It was a transition into recessive Moorish rulership. The royalty was inbred so they could be more easily controlled. Even the Rothschilds are just recessive Moors controlled by their so-called black masters. And it wasn't just Europe, it was the Americas as well. They brought millions of these clones or slaves throughout the world. Millions. The biggest slave port was Charleston, known as the Jerusalem of American slavery. Charleston was named after King Charles, aka the Black Boy, the Moorish king. The 1670 Virginia Act prohibited Aboriginals from buying Christians. Christians were white slaves being sold by Moors.
True.
Black nobility and the black popes get their origins from the Moors. The Black Dutch streamlined the slave trade. It is said most slavery was through Brazil and was conducted by Moritz, aka Moorish. That's why Jan Janssen was the founding father of New Amsterdam, aka New York. Moorish Europe worked together in Barbados to displace American Aboriginals, commonly mislabeled slaves. In terms of modern Moorish rhetoric, most have to start with Noble Drew Ali. Ali was a quasi-Islamist, although this man was the one who built the original Canaanite temple in New Jersey. Ali claimed that black Americans were Moabites. Moab and Canaan are both inbred, so it's not a good look. Moabites are Shemites, but they are not Israelites. They're actually adversaries to the Israelites. Ali mysteriously died shortly after Claude Green Day. Then Fard Muhammad pops up to start the Nation of Islam. Fard pushed the Yaqub theory, or the Jacob theory. This is against the Israelites, though the Moors were the ones mutating and crossbreeding with their slaves. Muhammad ushered in Elijah Muhammad, who was also a PDF, and that's why Malcolm X is killed and replaced by Louis Farrakhan, born from a Sephardic Moorish father. In the 60s, people switched from the English spelling to the Dutch spelling of Moor, and the indigenous American concept became popularized. Look. Leaders like York pop up, not a good look. Tariq Bey becomes a big influence, and the Wachita Nation. Many claim to be from Lemuria or Amara. Many claim to be from Calafia, the island of California. But California is Canaan, the land promised to the Israelites. The tribes of Israel, or Jacob, Yaqub, are patrilineal though. And Egypt is Mitzrayim. This whole Midwest and Mexico area all the way to Arizona is Hamite land. Missouri is Mithraim. So who are the mound builders? Many so-called black Americans are the offspring of black colonists and aboriginals. The Moors make up most of the shadow government of the earth. Their pale clones are just front office people.
This is who we're dealing with. All right? I'm just telling you. This is who we're dealing with. This is why the world is the way it is right now. I'm dropping receipts, okay? 1 second. Let me turn this down.
It is a group of groups. Not only were they whitewashed in the heart, they also whitewashed themselves. They were some of the first to breed with their slaves. They were the Huguenots in France. They were obviously the
One second.
Portugal, but also.
All right, let me close that out. I'm just looking at my phone, making sure I ain't lost you guys. So this is what we're dealing with. All right, so we're dealing with a enemy within. Like I said before, just because we share the same skin color, that don't mean we relatives. That don't mean that we are on the same vibe, right? I'm just telling you. The enemy of my enemy, what they say is my friend, which makes crazy sense to me. But my thing is, once you know the truth and you start to see it with clear eyes, then you begin to see the devastation. What I just simply wanted to point out to you all is that America is the true old world. We are ground zero. This is why the chaos continues on the soil. This is why we have these invaders here that came to us, 6 to 7 different countries that bombarded us over a period of 350 years, constant wars and constant battle. And now we are right back in the middle of some bull crap again, you guys. Y'all got to see it for what it is. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. There's so much information out here that will make your head spin. When you start to put it together, you will see it for what it is, right? They had to come over here and ruin every single thing that was created and take over things. I'm just telling you. They have poisoned our skies, poisoned the soil, sprayed the skies with toxic nanite chemicals. They lighten us up like we're on, frequencies from these damn cell phone towers and all the chemicals that are in the sky. Everybody's getting sick now. People who took the ouchie Fauci now are coming down with AIDS and cancer. If you guys just go search it, you'll see now that AIDS is now a full-blown epidemic again. I mean, they had seemed like they had got it curved down to where, the numbers were down. But now, because of all the things that have happened in the past 5 years, you don't know what you were taking. They tell you one thing, but something else could come about. And as we're seeing it right now, right? So I'm just saying, put the puzzle pieces together. So let's get back into it. So when the Spaniards got here, and one thing you have to understand, you guys, is when I share this information, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just sharing stuff that I found interesting and the majority of people don't even know, okay? You got to understand that this plane of existence, which is called a plane of existence, was once all melanated, and it's not blackwashing whatsoever. You got to get out of your feelings, and you got to do your research, and you got to really see it for what it is. There are a lot of my light-skinned brothers and sisters, quote unquote, I'll say for this video, white, as you just saw Taylor Durden. He's a light skin, all right, pale skin, light skin, Caucasian, and he's speaking facts. There's plenty of them out there that are doing that. And they're waking up faster than my beloved melanated brothers and sisters here on the American soil. So I'm just telling you, you guys have really got to separate yourself and distance yourself from so-called, quote-unquote, chaotic Negroes who push that like Tariq Nasheed bull crap. You got to separate yourself from that, and you got to really take time to pull back and study the things for yourself and understand the knowledge and what's transpired. So when these Spanish people got here, all the people around the world were melanated. So Caucasian, the original Caucasian people were dark skinned. Obviously the Moors, the Brits, the Scottish, the Irish, you've got all of the dark skinned races, the Spanish, Aztec, Mayan, all were dark skinned at one point. They were all dark skinned. All right. And I can show you videos and go through topics, but I'm just giving you a short point of view to explain this to you. So when these Spaniards got here, they were already they were looking at how the civilization was built, right? We were multilingual, agriculturally advanced, politically organized, spiritual complex peoples with cities, plazas, engineered landscapes, astronomy, medicine, maritime networks stretching across the Caribbean and into the Gulf. All right. So yet the Europeans carried these journals were men trained to see through narrow lenses, a lens that divided the world into white Christians. Now, I'm going to fast forward and tell you that there was, like Taylor said, there was a inbreeding that happened, and the Moors actually were the ones who started this whole phenotype, this whole new phenotype. And a lot of people will have a problem. Well, some people will have a problem with me saying that, but I know that to be true, just based on the information that I have read, right? Like I said, a house who stands together cannot be divided, all right? So when you have the introduction into the New World after the last reset for Tartary, right, this is where you have the quote-unquote the light-skinned race that comes about. Because Tartaria was really all melanated or black. I'm just telling you, not blackwashing, got to do your research. Once the new phenotype and new race came into about, they took them from their shores, which would have been Ireland, Great Britain, all throughout Europe, and they brought them here in the Americas, all right? This is why in Jamil Shamshi Deem's books, he talks about the laws that were passed at the time where American Indian, quote-unquote, dark melanated people were not able to buy white Christian slaves. Just going to tell you. They passed a law for that. Now, why would they have done that? I'm just telling you. I mean, if you think about it, There's no hate. I'm just simply shedding some light on some information that most people don't know. So, when the white Christians came over, they had dark slaves and pagans and others. And so instead of revising their worldview, they revised the people standing in front of them. Unable to understand the indigenous world, they renamed it. And in those names lay the first seeds of the paper genocide. Spanish observers filtered everything through color. Their vocabulary hardened almost immediately. All right. So then they say negros de lectura, which means natives black, indos pritos, dark Indians, indigenous, Negros, Black Indians, indigenous, Morinos, Brown Indians. None of these labels meant African. They were indigenous peoples. The Spanish knew it. They admitted it. Yet the words they chose, confused, contradictory, and racially loaded, would later be misread as evidence of African ancestry. One earlier chronicle confessed his astonishment plainly. All right. And I'm going to skip down because he talks about the description. Indians of Espanol, some are very black skinned, but they are not Negroes of Ethiopia. They recognize exactly who these people were, indigenous to the homeland. They simply refuse to record them that way. As expeditions pushed into Florida and in the southeast, this linguistic distortion intensified. The Spanish encountered the Guli, the Yamasee, the Tucumula, the Apalachee, and dozens of other nations with deep roots stretching across the region. These people held millennia of history, mound-building civilizations, plaza cities, hierarchy chiefdoms, maritime trade routes, diplomatic alliances, and agricultural infrastructures rivaling Europe's. I'm telling you. Some of these nations were light brown, some were copper, and some were deep purple, dark black. I'm just telling you, we range in colors, right? But instead of documenting indigenous variation, Spanish chroniclers reinforced their racial vocabulary. So what I'm telling you is, and in no uncertain terms, is in the beginning, the world was melanated. Then you had the divisive and the split. We were harmoniously, we lived cohesively for a period of time, but we've always had other extraterrestrial beings and other races here that would that we knew of, right? I'm just telling you from the Atlantean times, right? When you get into the Tartaria realm, because these are different resets, every time we get to a certain period in knowledge and understanding, this parasitic race takes over. This parasite and this inbreeding starts happening, and this is why we have the wars and the devastation that we have now. It's been 350 years since the last reset, and they're getting ready to flip it again, you guys. I'm just telling you. It's not a good look. It really isn't. We can't seem to get it together here, and I dare say that because of what they're doing to the children and the sexual assaults, the molestation, the unaliving, the adrenochrome, the sex trafficking, child pornography, all the above, this shit ain't going to continue too much longer. It's just not. We've gotten to the lowest point of existence that we're at right now. All of the other civilizations were at a heightened civilization. They had more technology, more understanding. They were spiritually connected, and they were a lot more intelligent than what we are now. We've been dumbed down to the lowest low. I'm just telling you. So, getting back to this covers from like the 15s and 1600s. This is going through the reset. This is going through the time of where we had the grand cities. We had Tartary going on before the fall of Tartary. These are books that were written around that time or during that time, right? And so what I want to jump down to is this part right here, okay? And I'm trying to go slow, but I have a lot of information, so I just want to run through a couple of things. I don't want this podcast to be too long, right? So in his book, he says, the last clause marks the beginning of the doctrine that would define centuries of American racial policy. An appearance overrides ancestry. This doctrine would survive the Indian slave trade, the Yamasee War, the removal, the Reconstruction, the Dawes Rolls, Jim Crow, Walter Plucker, modern academic misclassification that still goes on to this day, right? It's the birthplace where was here in the Spanish documentation of the 1500s. By the late 16th century, the consequences had already become legal. Dark-skinned indigenous people found themselves labeled as tributary, inferior, suspicious, or even enslaved. I'm telling you, we warred with a lot of other melanated people around the world. I mean, we did trade, but you got to understand something. When we get to a certain point and level of understanding and knowledge, people get bored. When it gets to be too easy, they get stagnated. And like Taylor says, it breeds parasites. And it really does. Stagnation is death, right? We did it to ourselves is what I'm telling you, right? So it says, not because of their nation or lineage, but because of how they looked. These visual judgments entered the official record, creating a paper trail that future governments could reinterpret however they wished. Later administrators would look back at the single phrase like Negro, Indio, and claim that the records proved African ancestry. They never stopped to question the European eyes that created the category. The era matters because it forms the blueprint for everything that follows. The Spanish did not just document, they defined, they categorized, and they imposed. And I'm talking about the dark-skinned Spanish as well as the quote-unquote light-skinned that we have now. A lot of the light-skinned brothers and sisters that are Spanish, okay, that are lighter than me. Let me put it that way. So skin tone became replacing lineage. Language of color began entering the archive as evidence. Mislabeling became systematic, spreading from chroniclers to missionaries to legal clerks. I'm telling you, when you see the level of structure that this whole dome has in place to keep a people down and to keep a boot on our neck, you would just, it's just no way. Like Taylor has said in his videos, and Chief Red Wolf has said in his, and many other people, Kimira, once you know and you find out the truth, you start moving differently. You can't help but see the truth. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, I'm not here to argue with anybody, to cause any kind of racial divide or racial tension. I'm not here to blackwash stuff. I'm pointing shit out that's in plain sight that people can go pick the book up and read it and go to the Library of Congress. Go look at the damn laws for yourself. Like today, a young lady on my Facebook page had posted about Hitler and how, after him being in power for so long and in control for a short period of time, homosexuality was gone. Certain other things had taken place and been restructured. But the crazy thing is, if you go by what was taught to you in school, you'll never understand that Hitler was black. He was melanated. He was a Negro. He was. I mean, I've got books over here describing what he looked like. But on video, you're going to see a short, pale-skinned, white man for the video. I'll say white. You'll see a white man with a mustache and dark hair. That was not Hitler. That's what I'm telling you. Everything you've been taught is a lie, and you just got to go do your research. Now, I've been accused by my own family members of saying that I'm a racist. I'm far from it. I just speak the motherfucking truth, okay? Sorry about my language. I'm just keeping it 100. I'm not a racist. I told you that. There's no way I can be. I have too many different races within my family to even be a racist. I can't even do that. I can't. That doesn't even compute to me. What is funny to me though is that when you see something for what it is, and you still have people actively denying it, to me it's like, what is that? What does that say about that person? If all the evidence and the facts point to one thing and you still don't want to see it for what it is, it's cognitive dissonance is what it is. I'm just telling you. So, all right, let's get on to this next part. So as long before the United States existed, long before there was a Dawes Commission or Racial Integrity Act, the Spanish had already built the apparatus of identity manipulation. The reorganized in indigenousy, all right? They blurred the line between dark-skinned native peoples and Africans. They created phenotype-based racial categories that would later appear in Britain, French, and American law. They inserted these distortions into the written record, knowing future generations would inherit them. The United States did not invent paper genocide. It perfected a weapon that Spain had already designed. Good job, Mike. Mike has got a brilliant book. I highly recommend you guys go over on his website and purchase this PDF, purchase this book, and browse through and look at all of the documentation that he has out there. There have been countless people that have done the work, and the information is there. You just have to take the time to go see it, right? So it says, and that weapon, the denial of identity through the language of color, began in the first decades after 1492. Now, from the 16 to 1700s, we have the Indian slave trade era, how Negro became a status imposed on dark-skinned natives. All right. So here's the map. You've got. I have to look on my phone. I think it's on my phone. I want to pull up a picture of ancient America with all the ancient names. I think I posted a long time ago of what it looked like previously with all the different countries here in this soil, on this continent. And what you see is once they did these resets, they took the countries that were here and they pushed them out to other land masses. So Britain was once here, France was once here, the Netherlands was once here, Amsterdam was once here. I'm just telling you. And they pushed them out to other parts of the world, but everything was founded here in the Americas. Like I said, the oldest forest is up through Pennsylvania and New York. You've got the Garden of Eden, which is in Florida. The Nile is the Mississippi. I'm just, man, I can't even, so much knowledge, you guys. It really is. It's fascinating to me that people are still walking around here dumbfounded and ignorant on the fact of all this stuff has transpired, right? And it's getting ready to happen again. So it says, if the 1500s were the era of confusion, then the 1600s became the era of conversion, not in a spiritual sense, but in a racial one. This was a century when the English stepped into the indigenous Southeast, and without understanding the people or the world they had entered, began redefining identity through a crude combination of violence, commerce, and paperwork. It was the century when the meanings of Indian, Black, and Negro collapsed into one another through the logic of slavery, and when dark-skinned indigenous peoples were pulled into a racial system, they would shape the future United States. By the time the English traders and settlers established footholds in the Southeast, they knew almost nothing about the indigenous nations around them. They did not understand matriarchal clans or political power of the mother's line. They did not understand town-based censorship or citizenship, kin-town diplomacy, or web of alliances that connected to the Guli, the Yamasee, the Appalachee, the Creek, the Kadawa, the Timucua, and the Cherokee, which is called the Anahuia or the Siksika. They did not, the Siksika are Blackfoot, all right? They did not grasp that these were sovereign nations with their own laws, hierarchies, and foreign policies. But the English did understand labor. They understood profit and their worldview. The most important category was not a nation or people, but slave or Slav, all right? This is the century when the logic hardened into the racial policy. As English settlers grew in Virginia and the Carolinas, the Indian slave trade exploded between 16 and 1700. Again, you've got the fall of Tartary and the hard reset. You got to remember, there were wars going all around this world. Eventually, Chief Red Wolf, like he said, I'm going to do something on the Bolshevik, because it's the same group of people that's doing this shit all around the world. And they've been doing it for hundreds of years, you guys. Any place that they go, they set up and they cause havoc and chaos. I'm just going to tell you. I'm just going to be honest with you. They do. So it says, the English enslaved more indigenous people from the Southeast than Africans. Captives from dozens of the tribal towns were taken in raids, traded away after manufacturing debts, and seized as supposed retaliation for imagined offenses. They were marched to Charlestown, inspected, branded, and shipped out to Barbados, Jamaica, Bermuda, New England, and Virginia. Some were even taken directly from the Creek towns. Others were the Yamasee villages, such as the Pocojalia and the Chatasi, others from the Apache towns devastated by the Spain's mission system. Most of these people had no African ancestry whatsoever. I'm going to say that for the people in the back row. Most of these people had no African ancestry whatsoever. But in English records, they were almost always called Negroes. Shout out to Shamsi Dean, my big brother Jamil. Like he told me over a year ago, Negro is synonymous with American Indian. And it is. If you got Negro on your birth certificate, I'm not trying to convince you of nothing. Well, I tell you, you need to do your genealogy. You're American Indian. There is no other. There is no other. We're going to get into the pretendians, okay? But I'm just telling you, if you are Negro, you're American Indian. That was the first racial conversation, all right, the conversion. The English did not use the ethnographic categories, they used status categories. In this administrative world, Indian did not mean a member of an indigenous nation. It meant someone recognized as such by the English officials, usually because they were useful, allied, protected, or needed for trade. Negro, on the other hand, meant enslaved. It meant owned, and it meant commodified. So if a native person was captured, they were automatically classified as a Negro. I'm going to say it one more time. So if a native person was captured, they were automatically classified as a Negro because enslavement itself became the label. The logic fed on itself. The label justified the enslavement, and the enslavement justified the label. You get it? I'm going to say that one more time. The logic fed on itself. The label justified the enslavement, and the enslavement justified the label. In 1685, Carolina colonial record captured this mechanism with brutal clarity. The Indians taken in war are called Negroes, and so likewise. The sentence is short, but its implications are enormous. It shows that the identity has shifted from kinship to labor category. The same document reveals something else the English refused to confront. Many of the enslaved indigenous captors were dark-skinned. That alone, in their eyes of the English officials, was enough to collapse their identity into a racial box. The English already understood. Another record from 1693 makes this point even more explicit. What I'm trying to tell you is you had so-called, quote-unquote, dark-skinned, quote-unquote, black people from across the pond in another country coming here and rounding up other black folk and selling them off. And then you've got the introduction of the new phenotype, which quote unquote is the Caucasian race that came in, and they propped them up and they set them up and put them in positions of power. And I'm just telling you, I mean, it's brilliant. It's actually a fucking brilliant plan. They did it. I'm not trying to give them caps, a shout out to them, but I'm just saying, once you see this shit for what it is, you be like, hi, damn, they did a plan. They messed over everybody. I don't give a shit what color you are, what race you identify with. They screwed us all over. They screwed the pooch, I'm trying to tell you. They really did. Because these things don't give a shit about who we are as entities or as people. I'm telling you, they are using us as hosts, as parasites. And we're getting taken over by something other than not quote unquote human. But that's another video. Just telling you. Just telling you. If you know, you know. So I'm trying to break it off in little pieces, but it's a lot of information and you guys got to get this. I mean, you got to study like you're going to take a college exam and you're graduating with your master's and you've only had like 3 nights of sleep and you've been studying this shit for like 3 weeks. I'm telling you that just it's like it's almost an impossible task, but you're just going to have to bring yourself up to speed on this, right? So back to what I was saying. So it says, a great many of these Indian captives are of dark complexion and are accounted Negroes. That line is the hinge between two worlds, the indigenous Southeast and the racial future of America. It shows that the English made no distinction between dark-skinned native people and the Africans. But you have to understand something. They had to set it up this way in order to introduce my light-skinned brothers and sisters, the quote-unquote Caucasian race. This is where they got it from. There was Negroes that was doing this stuff. There was black people that did this stuff in the very beginning. And then with them bringing in the new phenotype and setting them up in structure, This is why we have the things the way they are now. I'm telling you, if every single melanated person in the United States would do their genealogy and start waking up and stepping into that truth, the whole world would flip on its head. They would either have to force a reset, which would be a nuclear war, or they would have to freaking back down and start unassing the land patents and giving us back the land that should be rightfully within our families. And it passes through the female. We're going to get into that at some other time, not tonight. But the lineage passes through the female. So this is why you had a lot of my light-skinned, pale-skinned, quote-unquote, white men that were coming over here, the settlers were coming here, and they were marrying squaws, quote-unquote, Negro, quote-unquote, black, quote-unquote, American Indian women to get the land. I mean, it's brilliant. I think it's fucking brilliant. I mean, they had this stuff locked down tight on every aspect you could think of. They thought of shit, and they squirmed their way out of a lot of stuff, and they stole a lot of shit from us. I'm just telling you. It's fucking brilliant. It's sad that millions of people were murdered, towns were flooded, people were killed, sold off into slavery, unalived, thrown over on boats. I'm just telling you, it's the devastation that we have gone through in the last 350 years, no one can even comprehend. And even before that, you got to look, we had 5 other resets. So every time a civilization gets to a certain point in understanding and knowledge and growth, they flip the switch and everything is destroyed and it's reset. We're on a cyclical plane of existence. It's going to take at least 70% of us to wake up in order for us to make a change in this realm and in this world. And this is why I'm sharing this information, because it's critical for us to understand. So in this part it says, a trader's letter from 1670s offers the most revealing statement of all. They be Indians, but are taken and sold for Negroes by reason of their hue. This is the earliest English articulation of what would later define the Dawes Rolls, the Racial Integrity Act, and the entire bureaucratic system of Jim Crow. Identity was determined not by lineage or community, but by appearance, but by what a white official believed a person looked like. It was a lookership. The doctrine, okay, hold on. The doctrine was born here long before it appeared in federal law. Bacon's Rebellion, the turning point the colonies tried to hide. By the 1670s, the colonies were not only struggling with native relations, they were struggling with class unity. In 1676, Bacon's Rebellion erupted in Virginia, bringing together something the colonial elite considered far more dangerous than indigenous uprising. Poor whites, enslaved Africans, and enslaved indigenous people fighting side by side. See, they couldn't have that shit. As I'm telling you now, if we all would actually stand together and recognize the bullshit for what it really is, and know that this country was once all melanated, this whole world was once all melanated, that everything we've been freaking taught is a damn lie, and those mofos that are running the governments all around the world are all in cahoots with these bastards underground, and they've been sex trafficking, child trafficking, feeding us people, lying to us about every damn thing from inception. See, but a lot of people ain't gonna be able to handle that. So I'm just breaking you off a little piece, okay? So back to what I was saying. The whites, the enslaved Africans, and us, the autochthonous, melanated, indigenous, aboriginals here in the Americas, right, were fighting side by side. This was a multiracial rebellion terrified the ruling class. Okay, so like I said before, you got the unseen hand. You got Negroes running the world government, and then you've got their counterparts, which are the Caucasians, the white folks, that you see in seats of power and position of power. If you trace back the royal families, you will see all around the world, they were all dark-skinned people. They're all melanated. I'm telling you. The Rothschilds are even melanated. I'm telling you. It's fucking fascinating when you see it. Now, what I want to tell you though, on this side, when they start talking about this rebellion, you got to remember something. We've been fighting for 350 years. So you've got Jamil Shamshi Dean. When I read to you guys that book a couple of God, it's probably been a year ago, when I read to you all of the wars just here in America alone, the fighting and the unaliving of people is just, your mind can't even begin to fathom what transpired on the soil, you guys. I'm telling you, this place was a complete, they melted all these beautiful buildings down, and these pyramids and these cathedrals. A lot of the stuff is now just rubble. Like we're looking at it as though it's mountains, but it's actually what's remnants of the last reset and the last fighting that went on. You know, I mean, when you think about that, you got to know that there were once a lot more people on this plane of existence than what it is now. So just let that sink in for a second. So it says, the colonial response was not a reconciliation, it was a division by design. After Bacon's rebellion collapsed, Virginia's elite passed a series of laws that would reshape racial identity for the next 300 years, okay? The first anti-miscegenation law forbidding marriage or sex between whites and non-whites. That's the first thing, all right? Then they came up with the legal invention of the so-called white class or protected class. Now, I know I've shared videos over here before with Taylor Durden. I'm going to do a podcast with him too, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But I just want to explain to you all something. White is not a color. White is it's a status, it's a class, right? So, quote unquote, if you're an American Indian on record, then you are considered to be white. All right, you are considered to be white. You're not black. You're considered to be white. It is a status. I have met white people, quote unquote, for this video, I'm going to say Caucasian and white. I have met white people that have black on their birth certificate, okay? And they have blonde hair and blue eyes. And it's just because of their class. It's not the color, all right? I'm just going to tell you. When you start looking at your genealogy like I've done, and when Mike and I finish up my genealogy, I'm going to show you, you're going to see my great-great-grandparents, 10, I've gone back 11 generations. I'm trying to go back to the 15th and the 14th century is what I'm trying to get to, right? I'm trying to go back as far as I can, so when I pull it up and show you, you're going to see the reclassification real time on how your genealogy is going to look. And I'm pretty sure some people are going to have the same as me, and then there are people that's not going to be able to go back as far. But I just want you to understand that white does not mean the color of your skin. It's actually a class, all right? So it says the merging of dark-skinned indigenous people and Africans into the single Negro category. That's important. Again, if it says Negro on your birth certificate, I am telling you, you are not Negro. You're American Indian. You have to do your genealogy so you can correct your status. Even if you don't correct your status, you still need to know your tribe, and you still need to know your genealogy and your ancestry legacy, period. Even if you don't do the legal recourse of it, you still want to have that, and you still want to do a search on your land patents. Because I'm telling you, in no uncertain terms, your great-great-great-great-grandmother was the one who had the damn land, and when she married to a different race, that's when they took the land. Okay, they did everything a legally unlegal way, if that makes sense, right? So it says the merging of dark-skinned indigenous people and Africans into a single Negro category, harsh penalties to prevent cooperation between poor whites and enslaved peoples. This was the moment when the colonial government discovered a new tool of social control. If you divide the lower classes by race, I'm going to say it one more time. If you divide the lower classes by race, they will never unite against you. This is why we have the problem right now here in the Americas, aka. So let me say this. So it says the racial classification became a political weapon. All right. The caste system of white and Negro was born here, and it would determine how indigenous people were recorded for centuries. You see how they did that stuff? I'm just going to tell you. They did it. All right. By the 1690s, the consequences of the system had reached a breaking point. The Southeast was drowning in violence. English traders demanded military alliances, then enslaved their allies anyway. They manipulated trade debts to justify seizing hostages, and they raided towns for captives to sell. They targeted dark-skinned indigenous communities more aggressively because English record keepers assumed that darker complexion meant a person could be enslaved. All right, so I'm just going to tell you, and they do the same. They do the same dumb shit every single time. Like, people always want to throw up the part of what is that, Wall Street, Black Wall Street, and in Oklahoma. Do you not know that this entire plane of existence was once melanated? That was just one small town. You got to understand, this was worldwide. We were everywhere. Black people were everywhere. We built the pyramids. I'm just telling you, we built the grand castles that you still see today that we call courthouses and that we call universities. I'm telling you, the history is a lie, you guys. And when you see it for what it is, it's fascinating, right? But they had to keep us divided. And we're on this path right now. We're still divided. No one is coming together to even face what is about to really, what's really going to happen, right? So it says, in 1698, South Carolina reported spelled out the logic with disturbing precision. Many of the captives brought in are such blackness that they are most esteemed Negroes than Indians. And in that single line, the colonial racial hierarchy becomes unmistakable. Blacklist meant enslavable, okay? And basically, the thing about it is that we were the original slave owners, melanated people were, okay? And we actually, this is where they started flipping the script, where they had white indentured servants or Slavs that came over, and the uprising happened and everything flipped. The tables started turning. I'm telling you, it was melanated people that ensued all of this shit. When you see it for what it is, it's quite disappointing. It really is. I mean, everybody wants to point the finger at the white people, but it's really not the white people. It's not them. They are actually an instrument. They're being used. Okay? They're being used by quote unquote melanated people. I'm not blackwashing shit. I got receipts. I know what the hell I'm talking about. It's highly disturbing. It really is. So it says, enslaved meant Negro, and Negro meant not Indian. With each new entry in the record books, the paper identity of an entire indigenous nations began to collapse. Nowhere was there clearer than in Carolina, where the most aggressive racial sorting system in the colonies took shape. English officials did not track genealogy, clan identity, or political affiliation. They sorted bodies into 3 categories based on appearance. Here we go. Lighter-skinned indigenous people were labeled Indian. Darker-skinned indigenous people were labeled Negro Indians. And the darkest, regardless of ancestry, were labeled simply Negro. Okay? And it's straight. A ledger from 1694 revealed how quickly the system erased identity. Several Indians taken in war who might pass for Negroes and are so accounted by their planters. If the indigenous person could pass for a Negro, planters declared them one. That declaration became a legal fact. And once the paperwork said Negro, all right, the person's children inherited that identity and their grandchildren after them. And I'm telling you, the reason why our great-great-great-grandparents they stopped using the word Indian because they thought that it didn't benefit them. But I'm telling you, that's that brainwashing and that's that subjugation bullshit. That's what that is, okay? So it says, if a indigenous person could pass for Negro, planters declared them as one. The declaration became a legal fact, and once the paperwork said Negro, the person's children inherited that identity and their grandchildren after them. An entire bloodline could disappear from the indigenous world in a single generation, and that's what's happened. That's exactly what's happened. Missionaries working in the region documented their dismay at English misclassification, but their own records often reinforced it. One missionary wrote in the 1680s, "The English called them Negro, though they be Indians, for they judge only by the complexion." Here is a raw machinery of racialization in its earliest form. The belief that skin tone overrides all truths, even in the face of clear indigenous Ancestry. I'm telling you, when I pulled my freaking records, I've got the same freaking grandparents that were white. Then they were reclassified to mulatto. Then were reclassified to color. Then they were reclassified back to white. Then I'm like, what the hell? And you can see where they wrote out their name, their race. They would scratch it out, and then they would change it on the record. So I'm like, ain't this some bullshit? I'm just telling you, I'm living it and I'm speaking it. That's why I can talk about it. So, you know, so it says the English called them Negro, though they be Indians, for they judge only by complexion. So it says, but later governments and later historians treated these categories as biological classifications. In this way, missionary documents fused with colonial administrative records, creating a racial regime where the indigeneity dissolved under the pressure of European color language. By the end of the century, colonial law sealed the transformation. Legislatures across the Southeast began passing statutes that grouped dark-skinned indigenous people with Africans into a single racial category. If I even hear any of my family members calling themselves African American, I fire their ass up right away. Because I done spent thousands of dollars and I'm still working on it. And I'm telling you, we are not freaking African American. Not in my family. I'm telling you that. And for the people that I know that I grew up with, I just kind of went through Facebook and I kind of pulled some people's names up. And I went out there to the Indian rolls and started popping people's names in there. And I know for a fact there's like about 20 of you guys that your family name is on the damn dolls rolls, on the Indian rolls. Okay? So it's like, you guys got to do your research and go start looking at this shit for real. I mean, it's fascinating to me, but it's time consuming and it's expensive, but you can get it done. So like I tell you, if you call yourself Black or African American, I avoid you like the plague, because that to me tells me that you really don't know who you are, what you possess, and what's transpired on the soil. Literally, I mean, the reclassification is just downright despicable. It really is. When you start looking at the laws and you start seeing what they did, it's just it just blows your mind. So it says marriage laws and tax laws treated darker skinned indigenous people as non-Indian. Property laws declared that Negroes could not inherit a whole land, and dark-skinned natives fell under these laws automatically. This is the moment when the word Indian began to shrink on paper suddenly. Dark-skinned Creeks were listed as Negro. Dark-skinned Yamasees became Negro Indians. Dark-skinned Gula families became mulatto. Dark-skinned Apache people became colored. Not because the ancestry changed, but because the paperwork did. And that's what's in my genealogy. I have proof of that shit up and down. He's absolutely right about that. By the turn of the 18th century, the transformation was complete. Remember, we had the fall of Tartary, the Reconstruction, 1776. We had all that going on. We had nothing but wars and fighting. The Civil War was not what they told you. The first Republicans were dark-skinned, melanated people. It was us, the so-called, quote-unquote, black folk. We fought. The North and the South was a class war. I'm telling you, it really was. It wasn't what we were taught in school. Okay? And if you do your research, you'll see that. So it says, they then had been reclassified out of existence. The 1600s matter because they introduced the structural logic that every future American racial policy would inherit up until this day right now. Race is a status and not an ancestry. Appearance over community, paper identity over lived identity. By the 1700s, the stage was set for the Yamasee War, the massive indigenous uprising that would shake the colonies to their core. But instead of correcting the system now, the English doubled down on this bullshit. He didn't say bullshit. I'm putting that in there. And the racial machinery they built would survive into the United States, into the Reconstruction, and into Jim Crow, and then into the Dawes Rolls, and even until the 21st century. The century of conversion was complete. The classification, or the century of reclassification, was about to begin. All right? And then this part is about the age of the colonial record keepers, okay? So my point is just to shed some information on this, and I really want to bring awareness to this because a lot of people still, you know, they walking around here in this delusion, and you got to snap out the coma. You really got to see it for what it is, you guys. I mean, I'm at the point now where I don't even really watch TV. I watch it for a few minutes to catch the news as far as the weather, like here in Houston. But as far as all the other mess, it's all scripted. It's propaganda. It's brainwashing. And literally, the more you watch TV, the dumber you become. I'm just telling you. You always see me with a book in my hand or some yarn, crocheting, creating patterns, and researching. I just don't have time for the bullshit anymore because I see it for what it is. And my thing is, I want to get through this because I want to bring up some very important things about the Epstein files. Everybody's talking about them. But there's a couple of things that people aren't calling out that I haven't seen. And I want to bring it to you guys' attention. Not only was it a child sex trafficking ring and in bed with government officials, this network goes so much deeper than anybody could ever freaking imagine. I mean, everybody is in on this bullshit. I'm talking about local officials, politicians, judges, police officers, federal agents, legislative branches. I'm telling you, they're all in cahoots with this bullshit. And you have to really start to see it for what it is. And when you do, you're shaking your head and you're going, how the hell do we even figure out how to get you right the ship? You know, because we're being led to slaughter, literally. So anyway, let's get into this last part, and I'm going to read this page, and then I'm going to bookmark it for the next video. So let's finish this up. So, and it starts talking about how the clerks and the governments mislabeled into bureaucracy. So by the early 1700s, the indigenous Southeast had already endured 100 years of mislabeling, forced labor, enslavement, and racial distortion. By the 18th century, introduced something far more dangerous than Spanish chroniclers or English settlers. It introduced the bureaucratic class, the clerks, missionaries, governors, tax officials, probate writers, overseers, plantation bookkeepers, census takers, and whose pens would outlast every battle, every treaty, every empire. See, they had to set up the structure, I'm telling you. They had to set up the structure in order for them to do what they've done and to put these so quote unquote Siberian people in these reservations. Because now only thing they got is casinos. They got the land, they got some land, but they got casinos. But they've assumed our identities, but this ain't gonna stand too much longer. A lot of people are waking up to the fact that they are not the true American Aboriginal Indians. They're not. We are. And it's high time that we start acting like it. And it's high time that we start doing the research and calling them on their bullshit, right? So it says, these men rarely stepped into the battlefield, yet they possessed the power to erase entire nations simply through the categories they wrote in margins of their ledgers. This was the century when casual mislabeling hardened into procedure, when observation became policy, and when the early American Republic inherited an already corrupted archive without questioning the logic behind it. The British built the racial system, black, so-called quote-unquote Brits did it, all right? Black people did this shit. Brits built this racial system and the colonies refined it. When the new phenotype, quote unquote, the Caucasians were introduced, they took over, okay? And in the United States, adopted the tactic intact. By the 1800s, identity was no longer carried through community, language, or lineage. It was carried through paperwork, and paperwork had become a weapon. You know what? After me doing this stuff, what I find freaking fascinating is you got a lot of so-called unquote, and you know, I'm not race baiting at all because my granddaddy was white. All right, he was a white man. My mother's father. You got a lot of so-called unquote white people walking around here that don't even freaking know that they're actually black. They're Negro. They're American Indian. They don't know that. They don't know that they're Negro. I find it fucking fascinating. Oh, I find it fascinating. Oh, if they would only do their genealogy, they would see it. They got a big mama in their family. Anyway, by 1800s, identity was no longer carried through community, language, or lineage. It was carried through paperwork, and the paperwork became a weapon. The Yamasee War, the breaking point. This was between 1715 and 1717, right? And then it says, here's all the colonies right in here. So you got the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Choctaw over here on this side up here. You don't see that. The Yamasee, the Ochi, the Creek, the Muskogees, the Taraquois, and the Catawbas. It's tongue twisters. So you have, I have an old map with all of the tribes. Now you got to remember something, y'all, okay? There's over 350 tribes. They took the 350 tribes and dwindled them down to 5 civilized tribes. And then they let the so quote unquote Siberians, aka the light skinned, the white folks, pay their way onto the roll so they could become Indian. All right. That's what happened. And I'm not throwing shade. It's a brilliant plan and it worked. And to this day, you got a lot of motherfuckers running around here thinking they Indian when they're not. They actually from the Caucasus Mountains. Just saying. You know, some of them do have us in them now. Some of them do have black people in their family. They have melanated people in their family, Aboriginal. But a lot of them are walking around here and they just delusional. They are, and they get offended when you start speaking the truth. See, it's always a problem. It's okay when everybody else pretends that everything's okay and this is this, black is black, white is white, yellow is yellow. But it's moment when an Aboriginal, aka quote unquote, I'm gonna say for this video, black person starts to speak truth, everybody gets in an uproar and everybody has a problem with it. And then they want to say we anti-Semitic. How in the hell can we be anti-Semitic when we the children of Shem? We are the descendants of Shem. And the ones who say they are, but they are not, they are Ashkenazis. They are not the true actual tribes of Israel. We are. So how can we be anti-Semitic when you aren't even a true freaking tribe of, you're not even part of the tribe. You wrote yourself in as a 13th tribe. And then they're trying to pass laws in Ohio to speak out because if you say something against the Jewish people, you're an anti-Semite. But you're not a Jew because a Jew is one inwardly, not outwardly, because you are actually, what do you call it? You were grafted in. You adopted it. You are not an actual Jew. So it just fascinates me. I think it's fucking hilarious. I really do. Because once you know the truth, it's just like, you just look at people because you don't even argue anymore because they're stupid. They really are because they don't read. So it says in this part, it says the warning signs have been building for decades. By 1715, the English had dishonored nearly every alliance they formed in the Southeast. All right. They enslaved the very indigenous allies who fought beside them. They labeled dark-skinned natives captured as Negroes, collapsing ancestry into skin tone, and they sold entire families into the Caribbean. So you got a lot of niggas that are in Jamaica, and I said niggas for the video. You got a lot of dark-skinned, melanated people that are in Jamaica and in the Caribbean and in Haiti and Dominican Republic that are actually from here, that are literally from this shores right here. And some of them know it, some of them don't. But it just, because of the mislabeling and them selling people and shuffling people around the way they did. You see what I'm saying? So they labeled dark-skinned natives captured as Negroes, collapsing ancestry into skin tone. They sold entire families in the Caribbean. They imposed fraudulent debts on tribal towns, all right? They manipulated trade to create dependency and then used dependency to justify the violence against the people, right? See how they did that shit? But beneath these offenses lay a deeper cause, economic usuries for predatory that has destabilized the entire region. I'm going to tell you something. What these people actually did was they committed usury. They committed usury. They haven't created any damn thing. We were the ones that created every damn thing. And they came in and they usurped everything. And they slapped their own monkey paws all over everything and called it something other than what it really is, which was lying, cheating, murdering, stealing, and usury. It's what they're known for. But it's not going to work out for them, I'm telling you. In the end, it's not. So it says, but beneath these offenses lay a deeper cause, economic usury, so predatory that it destabilized the entire region. The debt trap that sparked the war. Okay, the Carolina traders developed a credit system designed to entangle the Yamasee communities in permanent, unpayable debt. See, and they do that shit right now. They're doing it right now with people. Cars, homes. Do y'all not know that after they passed this laws, and I don't want to get too deep off topic, I'm just going to say this and I'm going to get back to this part because I'm going to wrap it up after this page. We don't have to pay for our cars and for our homes, you guys. They're already fucking paid for. When you get a social security number, they open up an account in your name. They trade us on the stock market because we're all chattel. We're all slaves. I'm telling you that. I am telling you that. I promise you. But the problem is most people would not be able to handle let me put it this way. I'm not going to say most people. There are some people that will be able to manage their accounts and be able to submit paperwork and do everything legally by the book to release their debt, to discharge their debt. And then there are other people who would be well suited just to continue working and living the life that they're living and keeping their heads buried in the sand. This information is not for everybody. A lot of people will not be able to handle the truth, and therefore they will not be able to let go of the system that was given to them since birth, right? There's only a few people that are going to be able to actually walk away from this shit and understand it and actually do something about it for the betterment of themselves spiritually, if that makes sense. So they forced credit and inflated prices. They made repayment in deerskin and buckskins, right? And they said that repayment was demanded not in money but in buckskins, the regional trade standard. Traders assigned outrageous conversion rates. They'd come in and they do this shit, right? This was in the 1700s. They're doing the same shit now. They're getting ready to flip the dollar. I'm telling you. And it says these numbers were designed to ensure that repayment was impossible, right? And then it says the third part, debt as justification for enslavement. When the Yamasee families could not meet the fraudulent terms, traders claimed the right to seize children as apprentices. They took their damn kids. They made women into servants, and they took men as war captives. Under English racial logic, any seized person, regardless of ancestry, became a Negro off the muscle. It don't matter if you are classified as Indian. If you were taken in as a slave, you are reclassified as a Negro off the bat. And entire towns declared in arrears. And that's how they came in and they took the land. So the Yamasee settlements were recorded as owing tens of thousands of buckskins, a deliberately manufactured fiction used to justify kidnapping, selling, and enslaving their population. And this is just one tribe, y'all. They did this full scale, all on this soil here in the Americas. And I'm telling you, there were wars going on all around the world. In every continent, everybody was fucking fighting. Everywhere. I'm telling you. And then you got this mass reset that happened, right? So it says, open discussions taking the Yamasee children. Surviving colonial correspondence reveals traders speaking casually of seizing Yamasee boys and girls to satisfy accounts. I may do a special segment on cannibalism and how we as American people have been eating people for years. I may do that. I don't know. I might get flagged on my account, but I'm going to try to bring it to y'all because I found some interesting information. And if I show it to you, you ain't going to never look at a damn hamburger the same no more. I'm just telling you. And interesting enough, not to get off topic, human meat tastes like chicken. So when you're going into these chicken places, do you really think you're eating chicken? That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it alone. Anyway, number 5, bullet point 5. Open discussions of taking Yamasee children. Surviving colonial correspondence reveals traders speaking casually of seizing Yamasee boys and girls to satisfy accounts. This economic warfare was the final breaking point when they started taking the babies and then all hell broke loose. Indigenous trafficking in the wake of debt crisis. This entire planet, every single race has been enslaved. Okay? And in this entire planet, you got to understand that the backbone of all of this bullshit is none other than melanated people. Whatever continent, whatever nationality, it's always been melanated people fighting other melanated people. This is what started the shit off. And this is where you got the new phenotype. Where the new phenotype was introduced to be a boot on our neck, the American Indian, the Negro. Okay? That's what it was really about. When I read it, I was like, yeah, it's plain as day. But like I said, I'm not trying to convince you anything. You just got to do your research, and you'll find the books, and if you want me to send you a list of what you can look at, I can do that. But I'm just telling you, it's going to take you probably a couple of years to get through all the information. Like it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but I'm just giving you the short version of it, right? So then it says, indigenous men were shipped to Barbados, Antigua, Jamaica, and Bermuda, where sugar plantations consumed human lives at staggering rates. And interesting enough, we, the melanated Thothonus Aboriginal Indians, owned the plantations, and we're the ones that taught these English how to farm. They didn't know how to do any of that shit. We were the ones that did that, right? I'm just telling you. So indigenous women were kept on in Carolina and Georgia plantations, forced into domestic labor, field work, and sexual servitude. And that's the truth, yeah. And the ones who had the land, the squaws as they would call us, had the land, they would marry them and get them pregnant, have children by them, and then they would also kill them. They would kill them and take their land. That was a thing. That was a real thing. So it says indigenous children were sold as servants, recorded as mulattoes, ensuring their descendants would never again appear as indigenous in the official records. I have that in my family tree. I have that. So I mean, that's the truth. I can attest to that. He's speaking truth on these pages when he says that. The Yamasee and their allies understood that if nothing changed, their people would be entirely consumed by the system. Thus, war was erupted in 1715, and it was not sudden; it was inevitable. Now, I want you guys to understand something, and this is I'm going to read to this last part right here, and I'm done. I'm going to get to this part, but what I want to tell you is, when you see these dates like this, like it says 2026 right now, it's really not 2026, you guys. It's still, they added 1,000 years to the timeline, so to even confuse us even more. So when you're reading this and when it says 1715, it's actually 715. Okay, and right now, we're taught that this is 2026. It's not. It's actually like 1017, 1018. So the timeline is off. It's off. They've added 800 to 1,000 years to the record, and that's only to confuse us. Okay. So this last part right here, and I'm finishing up. The coordinated indigenous uprising. The Yamasee, joined by the Creek, the Apache, the Kadawa, the Chiri, and all the other southeastern nations, rose together. Their goal was not to conquest, but to survive. They struck traders first, the architects of the economic destruction, and then plantation settlements. South Carolina nearly collapsed under the coordinated assault. The Yamasee War was not a simple revolt. It was a final attempt to stop the machinery that was erasing the people on paper and selling the bodies in chains. Aftermath, identity, and rewritten by the ink. The British response exposed how far the racial logic had advanced. A 1717 South Carolina Council Journal recorded, some of the Indians are so black as to take on for Negroes and are entered into our books. This sentence marks a turning point in the entire early American archive. Lookership, the belief that appearance overrides ancestry had become administrative law. And then it says the fugitive slave adds the public record of erasure. One of the clearest windows into the transformation comes from fugitive slave advertisements. I may show some of those because you have to read some of the newspaper articles back then. The stuff that they put in the paper back then, you would be shaking your head going, what the hell? I mean, it's out there. And people can't, we have a lot of so-called quote-unquote Native Americans that argue on TikTok about this shit. I don't even argue with those fools no more. Because if you just go pull the newspaper ads and do an internet search, I mean, you got to pay money for these sites, and maybe some of them don't want to do that. But you got to pay money for it. When you go to the Library of Congress, you got to set up an account. I'm just telling you, you can find the receipts to show this shit. So, like I told you before, Hitler was black. He was melanated. He wasn't a white guy. I got the book over here on my shelf. I could take pictures and show you. I'm just telling you, it's just crazy how they rewrote everything. And it confused people when they do that shit intentionally. So, it says, one of the clearest is the slave advertisements, which reveal indigenous people reclassified in real time. Here's the ads. Indian mulatto boy speaks broken English. Runaway Yamasee wench called a mulatto servant. A mulatto Negro fellow of Indian breed. A Creek slave mistaken for a Negro. These notices show how indigenous identity was overwritten not just by officials, but by everyday print culture. Like they put the shit in the paper and then you're going to try to lie about it later on. Come on, man. Below is one such advertisement as an example of how Southeastern Native people were described. They were hunted and categorized in the 1700s, right? And here it is, my last part. I'm done. $10 reward. Run away from the Fubascrubber on his journey from the Willenburg on the 11th of May near King William County for a mulatto servant man named John Newton, about 20 years of age, an Indian by birth, 5'6" high, slender man with a thin visage, a forelook remarkable, projected lips, wears his own black hair tied behind with long curling locks at his ears. Locks. Okay. Yeah, we had locks, we had braids. I'm just telling you. It's just unbelievable. And it says, had on a light brown frisé, pullitif coat, lapelled, and a waffle coat of fame with a common plate buttons, beaver hat, much worn leather breeches, a quarter yarn flockings, and old shoes with a pair of large fringe ridge pinch back buckles. Man, I'm telling you, they put all kind of shit in the paper. Come on now. I'll just drop down and it says, he vows and dresses well, but is much addicted to liquor. And so they said his ass is a drunk. So you can find him probably in a damn bar. Anyway, such ads were not random. They were one of the clearest tools of paper genocide, standardizing reclassification and public view. And then, of course, you know that the churches, quote unquote, the black churches, which I've covered in my last video, talks about how they were instrumental in getting our people to become more docile and beginning our people to follow the quote unquote Christian narrative, right? Because that was never our way. We were never a religious people. We've always been a spiritually connected people to the source, to the land, to the earth. And we didn't do religious cults. We just didn't. That's not our way. And, you know, that was brought over here by none other than the colonizers. I mean, and then that's the truth. That's the truth of it, whether you like it or not. I'm just speaking facts. So I'm going to stop right here on this page where it says the fugitive slave ad, because we covered that, right? And when I come back, I could have probably went through and finished this whole thing up, but pretty much it talks about here, the earliest census takers were not genealogists. They were local white men with instructions to sort population into white, Negro, mulatto, and Indian. And a 1746 census note reveals the entire mythology, right? It says the Indians dwelling amongst us, if of dark complexion, are generally set as Negro or mulatto. Appearance became evidence, evidence became law, and law became ancestry, at least on paper. So they had a collective group of people that they pushed all of this down. And then I'm not even talking about, now we're just talking about the reclassification of us as quote unquote, I'll say for this video, black people. But what you really got to understand is how the actual quote unquote white people came to be and how they were created and how this fits into the timeline, right? And I may need to go through that and pull up some stuff and show you some text on that, because a lot of people really don't even know that. And my light-skinned brothers and sisters, I mean, some of my quote unquote white friends know that, you know, the ones that do research and you see videos on YouTube and over on TikTok and Facebook, they know where they came from. I've only about one or two of them that actually spoke out and said something about it. Guy Anderson, he actually did say that. I mean, he knows for a fact that his family is of the Cabbage Patch lineage, and that's fine. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm telling you, you know, we all come from this great deception, and people really got to get over their feelings when they start talking about race and stuff like that, because, you know, I'm telling you, there are quote unquote a lot of white people that are really not white. They're actually Negro, and they don't know it. And, you know, vice versa. So it's fascinating to me that they were able to pull the wool over so many people's eyes and get people not to see the truth of their existence, right? Because if they keep you looking outwardly, you will never look within, and you will never focus on developing that relationship with the creator of all and reconnecting to the All-Father so that you can ascend to get the hell out of this place, right? Who wants to keep coming back in here? See, there's a difference between incarnation and reincarnation, right? I don't want to have to do either. I don't want to incarnate in this bitch again, and I don't want to reincarnate in this bitch again. I don't want to do neither one. I want to get the hell out of here. So anyway, I hope this has been beneficial to you guys. I know I've been all over the place. I wanted to share this information with you guys because I find it interesting. A lot of people do not know it. When I come back, again, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to drop down, not to this part, so I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to go to where it talks about the Dawes Rolls, because this is really instrumental in how the Green Peach War and the Dawes era, it's instrumental for you to understand how they actually came up with this magnificent plan. And the part of this is when this started, when this started here in the Americas, you've got fighting and other things going on in other countries that tie into this, and it's significant with this, right? I mean, I'm just telling you, it's been nonstop wars and fighting and killing for over 350 years, actually longer. But when you start to lay in the foundation and you look at the picture on a map, if you're looking at a map, you start putting the puzzle pieces together, you'll see how they did it. They were very smooth and very instrumental, and they had to have help. And they didn't just do it with melanated black people. There were other life forms, other entities, other beings that assisted with this, okay? Because we've gotten to this point now by determination and by sheer will and them staying on target and being focused to do what they've done thus far, okay? So anyway, I appreciate you guys joining me. I hope this has been beneficial. I know I've talked a lot. Drop comments in and let me know what you think. Again, when I come back, I'm going to talk about the Dawes error, and we're going to get into discussing that. And then before I log off, I'm going to show this one last video from Taylor, because if you guys haven't subscribed to him, I really think you should, because I think it would be beneficial. Hold on, I'm still sharing my screen. Hold on, let me see. I'm just making sure that you can see my screen. 1 second, I'm loading it. And this is my YouTube. Y'all be like, what does Carolyn be watching on her YouTube? Man, I'll be watching so much stuff y'all don't even know. I want to show this one part to you guys, and then I'm going to get out of here. So this part I've already shared, but I'm going to show you, and I'm going to let you listen to this right here. Here we go.
There have been constant reset wars since the fall of Rome, and civilization was much more advanced then. Kingdoms developed organic drone armies and drone workforces. Look, organic AI, aka slaves. The slave armies eventually revolted. The Huns extorted Rome and were a big contributor of the fall. This was a big part of the migration period where barbarians took over Europe. These are all invasive barbarians. These are not Aboriginal Europeans. War is sexual. It always ends up in crossbreeding. War means confusion, and genetic confusion is a big part of that. Charlemagne is the barbarian king that modern Europeans descend from. Look, that is, of course, if he actually existed. He might just be a concept of the barbarian takeover or represent a group of people. As you can see, the timeline never adds up, and there's much more than 300 years being added. Look, Charlemagne was a barbarian related to the Normans. The fallen Anglos and other barbarians took over brown-skinned Britain, and Britain became completely normalized in the Norman conquest, a drone or clone takeover. That's why Ben Franklin said Europe is swarthy and the drones or clones were the minority by the late 1700s. Then we get the Crusades because the so-called Holy Land is a major choke point for trade, followed by all these other reset wars. Just constant reset wars. It's really been a constant world war for hundreds of years. And the English paid the Prussians to fight France to destroy France's wealth. This made England the superpower of the world. The Revolutionary Wars brought us conscription and total war, which means they started drafting people and destroying everything, not just military installations. The Civil War is a great example of total war. This wasn't a war, they were just destroying the history. Then more reset wars. The revolutions across Europe in 1848 were slave uprisings. It was an attempt to push out the remaining quadroon and mulatto-looking leadership. And again, we have this theme of controlling the supposed Holy Land choke point. That's how the Crimean War was, a choke point war. Same wars being fought today. The 1848 slave uprisings or revolutions are what caused the Franco-Prussian War. This is what caused World War I. World War II is an extension of World War I. The Franco-Prussian War set up the scramble for Africa. A Prussian and a Belgian carved up Africa, setting the stage for World War I. They reset Europe, Asia, and Africa, and they were all selling opium together. And everybody in World War I was cousins. The Bolsheviks reset Russia, and Lawrence of Arabia reset the Middle East. So Britain and France carved up the Middle East so there would be perpetual conflict. So World War II starts in Poland to get Prussia back. And it's funny, the English are just Germans. World War I and II set up the wars of 47 and 48, which are the same wars as today. Then they collapsed China into communism to set it up to be a rival today. Then we get dozens of isn't real wars. Look, which brings us to today. These are mass cullings and financial reset wars. World War has slowed down but has never stopped. These wars are used to control the breeding and general flow of creativity.
Yep.
Constant reset wars.
So I wanted you guys to see that. So not only is that happening, but I'm telling you, it's on a mass scale. So what we're seeing as of Friday that started, that's another banking cartel move. And then once that happens, they're going to start with probably Taiwan and Philippines, or China in that area, in the Asian countries. That's going to be another war that's going to start. I'm just telling you. So when you see a pattern of what these people do, then you start to understand the brevity of the situation. Like literally, they've all lied to all of us. And it's time for us to arise and awaken our eyes and do what we need to do to ascend. So anyway, I appreciate you guys for joining me, and thank you so much. And remember what I always say, you guys need to be the change. We need to be the change that we want to see all around this earth dome, because it's up to you and I to make a positive change. I will talk to you guys soon.